Perfect. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for those of us who are joining us now on Facebook Live. I have been excited about this opportunity for probably, she doesn't know this, but for more than 2 years has been a goal of mine. And so those of you who know Lee Starro on our Senior Director of External Affairs on our team, he said to me, we're going to make this happen somehow, some way. So I'd like to introduce to you someone who I actually consider a friend at this point, and that is co-chairwoman Gayle Manchin of the Appalachia Regional Commission. So do you want to tell the people, first of all, who you are and where you came from?
Well, a lot of people have a lot of ideas about that.
That's why I figured I'd let you tell them.
That's right. So I am Gayle Manchin, and I am from West Virginia, the only state that is totally within the Appalachian region. I am the 13th appointee as a federal co-chair. Mm-hmm. Not the first woman, but the first appointee from West Virginia, okay. Which to me was a little unusual, with West Virginia being a big part of that middle of Appalachia. So appointed in 2021, became confirmed. Yeah. It's the big words. Confirmed in May, and so have been, sort of came in the middle of COVID, right. But that gave me a chance to get indoctrinated, and then began really working with as COVID kind of moved out. Right. But my background is education, and as an educator, besides teaching in school and at the college level, mm-hmm. I had a master's in reading, directed an AmeriCorps program for a couple years, mm-hmm. served on our State Board of Education, also served as the First Lady of the state.
Don't say. Some people say you're married to some guy that some people might know, who's been a part of kind of West Virginia politics for a while.
Yeah, for a while.
For a while.
Yeah, for a while.
So you've been married to this guy how long?
55 years.
Get out of here.
Yeah, we were children.
But you're born and raised in West Virginia.
Yes.
Right? Okay. And many people don't know that West Virginia is one of the only state fully in Appalachia with all of its 55 counties.
Yes.
Yeah. And so with this job, I keep thinking about it. Like, with this job, what made you want this job?
Well, interestingly, I didn't know at first that was even an option. And when I did, I just felt like that through these different roles that I have had the opportunity to be involved in as an educator, as a First Lady, as a director of AmeriCorps, working with community boards and projects, that it was always about trying to secure money. Mm-hmm. It was always about writing the next grant, mm-hmm. Finding out who we could partner with. And so, of course, the Appalachian Regional Commission, of whom I had written several grants to myself, just was such an integral part of everything that I have done in my life. Mm-hmm. And in fact, Joe said to me, Gayle, this job literally was created for you. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, isn't it nice that I live long enough to be able to do it?
Have the opportunity to serve, because it is a position of, I think, true service. When I look at this position, I see it as one that plays this very vital role in crisscrossing. I mean, because one of the things I'm getting ready to ask you, so give you a few minutes to think about it, is what's the purpose of the Appalachia Regional Commission? And I want to even talk a bit about the history, how Kennedy started it, how we got here. But this job requires you to do a couple of things. You got to work with governors. You got to work with local county folk. You got to work with folk from the hollers. You got to work. So if you could take a few minutes and tell them the history of ARC, kind of how we got here, and then let's talk about the priorities. And kind of why it is that you kind of see yourself and how you can crisscross all of those areas, which I see you doing better than many people, I think, frankly, could.
Well, and in fact, I think if you ask people that have known me for many years, what is the strength that Gayle has, they would say she's a convener. It was all about who can you bring together. People would come with questions or problems. I couldn't solve them, but I could think off the top of my head, if we had 5 or 6 people in the room together, we could solve it. Yeah. So I think that is one thing. The other thing that I want to mention before I go back to the history is, I think, you always talk about that key ingredient, the secret sauce. I think in statute, it's written that an ARC is, the commission is a partnership. That's why I'm called a federal co-chair. And so the 13 governors are my commissioners. They select one governor to serve each year as their state co-chair. But we are partners. But it starts at the local community. Right. So it's never about ARC going out and handing out money. I mean, to me, that is what is so perfect about the ARC. The local community knows what their problem is. They have to pull a group together to find the solution. They have to have money in the game. They go to the state. They sell it to the state. State matches it. Then they come to ARC. So it's their program. It's their community. It's their commitment. And when you go to visit these state projects, that's what you see.
Now, you just said something there, but so I want to make sure people understand this. Is ARC a federal government entity or not a federal government entity? How's it funded?
No, we're a federal entity. We are funded by Congress.
Okay.
We are in the budget.
Okay.
And we have been very fortunate with President Biden that he understands rural America, certainly understands the Appalachian region, born and raised in Scranton, Pennsylvania. So he has been very generous in his support and in his budget. So that makes a big difference. But when ARC was founded, when Kennedy came to campaign in West Virginia to be president, he was appalled. There was no highway system. A lot of isolation, a lot of poverty. He said, how can a state grow if it has no highway system? So he went back with that key purpose to develop this Appalachian region commission to build a highway system. Now, unfortunately, he was assassinated before it became law, and LBJ sort of pulled it in under his war on poverty. And so, but that is how and why we were funded. So our mission was to build a highway system. And we have done that about 91%. All through from southern New York to northern Mississippi, we have built this network of highways that now connects this mountain ridge and region to the rest of the country.
Now, is that where the Bird Highway system comes from in West Virginia? Was that a part of that, or is that a separate thing?
No, it was all a part of that. So there's so much funding through the ARC, and then states would also put money in, and certainly Senator Byrd brought a lot of money to West Virginia.
We miss Senator Byrd in that way, I think.
That's right. Brought a lot of money, and much of that went into the highway system as well. So it was a combination of funds.
Well, now that we are further along, I think kind of further along in the mission and the purpose of ARC, what are some of the other priorities for ARC right now? Because one of the things I want to talk to you about is the impact of the opioid crisis, particularly around what we call the syndemic of HIV, hepatitis C, and substance use disorder on the Appalachia region. So what are the priorities of ARC as a whole?
Well, going back to the mission to build roads, but that was to give parity. So that people that live throughout the Appalachian region would have parity with the rest of the country, have the same opportunities. And so the highway system certainly helped, but then it was about clean water, it was about sewage treatment plants, it was about education, it was about economic development. And so as the years have rolled by, that has all continued to work in. And so the Appalachian region, along with the local and state governments, look at what are the priorities, and particularly very rural, isolated communities, what are the issues? And along with building the highways and fresh water, then, of course, as you brought up, the opioid crisis hit. For whatever reason, Tony, I've never understood this, but your most vulnerable areas will be the ones that will be hit the hardest by something like the opioids. And certainly this was no exception. In fact, I don't say this to brag about it, but West Virginia right now in the past year led in the number of deaths per capita in opioid overdoses.
Right.
So it is definitely an epidemic. And that brought about one of our grants, which was Inspire. Mm-hmm. One of the things that we found through our research and our work here at ARC is it's not just about recovery. Mm-hmm. It is about recovery. Right. It's important. But it is so much more. And it takes that entire community supporting that individual from recovery to a safe place to live, training for a job, counseling, health care, sometimes transportation, all of this as a support system so that that individual does not go back to that lifestyle that got him or her in trouble in the first place. So there's a support system there that continues. Yeah. And the purpose is to give this individual a new sense of hope, of that person, that individual can become an asset in their community rather than a liability.
You know, I want to kind of stick with this for a minute, in part because I think that you talked about the unfortunate statistic, actually, of West Virginia leading still in the response in overdose deaths. You know, and I know that West Virginia, but many of the jurisdictions within Appalachia, right, are kind of impacted. You know, if we look at some places in Indiana, we look at Ohio, we look at some southern West Virginia, Jersey.
It's everywhere.
It's everywhere. But we're also having like a challenge in Tennessee right now where they've given back a bunch of money to the Centers for Disease Control for their HIV and Hep C response. I think that's going to have a huge impact on community-based organizations being able to deliver these services. You know, when we really started looking at particularly hepatitis C throughout the region, when we started realizing that, you know, West Virginia had actually been leading in also hepatitis C for more than a decade. So, you know, I want to talk to you a bit about how we do this better, right? Like, because I know that you are passionate about workforce development opportunities. I know that you're also very passionate about making sure we more effectively and efficiently use our recreational activities, not just for activity's sake or recreational sake or health and exercise and wellness sake, but also for the sake of economic development. There's opportunities there. Can you talk to me a bit about kind of how you see a bigger vision for the region's response to the opioid crisis, right? Because it's all of the things that you mentioned, but then how do we do it?
Right. Well, I think, you know, we talk about it takes a community, it takes a village to build. And I think that's the first thing that we have to understand, that it's no one person's responsibility. It's not public health. It's not education. It's not elected officials. It's not the faith group. It's everyone. And the judicial system. And so if everyone comes to the table and sits down and says, what is the part that I play? Mm-hmm. How can I be a support to this system? Then you start building a community that is working together to pull that community together and give everyone, again, parity, bringing everyone up to the ability to have the same access to services, to jobs, to a quality of life that everyone else has. And so, to me, that is probably one of the most critical factors, that you certainly have to have your health officials and your doctors on board, but it takes that business community then. Because you know what? If those businesses will not give these individuals a second chance, then we're right back where we started from. Yeah. So it takes it all. And then it takes sort of this continuum, someone kind of there monitoring, is this individual moving along? Are they in a safe place? Are they succeeding? And it's not easy. I mean, if it were easy, we wouldn't have this problem.
Right.
But it is about access. And in order to have access, everyone has to be participating.
So you've been in this job just over 2 years or just under 2 years?
Just under 2
Just
years.
under 2. So when you signed on the dotted line, because I'm imagining there was paperwork, it's the government, right?
Yes.
So there was some paperwork involved.
I always.
All right. So when you signed that paperwork and you put the pen down, right, and you got up and you left whatever room it was that you signed that paper in, and you walked off, what did you say the first 5 things you were going to do were going to be?
Well, I was...
Okay, 3 or 5. You give me 3 or 5. I went for 5 because I was like, I want 5,
okay.
but you give me 3 if you can give me 3.
Well, basically I was going to listen and learn.
Okay.
Because I knew West Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
But that's all I knew.
Right.
And I knew that there was probably a whole lot about West Virginia I didn't know when it came to ARC. Mm-hmm. So coming in when COVID was still in effect and it was sort of closed down, gave me a lot of time here in the Washington office to learn about the setup, the researchers, the data analysts, the program managers, all these people that really make that program run. Mm-hmm. Federal co-chairs come and go.
Right.
But this is a big engine that just keeps running.
How many people work here? I don't know that. How many people work here?
There are probably about 70.
Wow. Okay.
And this all, yes.
Uh-huh.
So communication, technology. So you think of all the everything that has to come together to make an agency effective. And so a lot of my time was spent learning about the office, meeting the people. Mm-hmm. Then as COVID let up, I started visiting the states. And as I visited, the thing that probably surprised me the most is how much we had in common.
Okay.
I mean, to think about people in southern New York and northern Mississippi having things in common, really? Mm-hmm. Well, they do.
Right.
And all through the Appalachian region. And so what struck me is that we had 13 states doing some pretty remarkable projects. Mm-hmm. But then I started thinking, they didn't name us the 13 states of Appalachia. They could have. Okay. But they didn't. They named us the Appalachian Regional Commission. Mm-hmm. And it struck me that there was probably it was intentional, that we were a region. We were connected by these mountains. We were connected by these rivers. How do we make that make a difference? How do we lift up the region? If we're talking about parity, then how do we lift up this region? If we lift up the region, all of our states are going to do better. Mm-hmm. So it's not like if I'm saying to the governors, now we need to share, we need to work together. They're not going to lose from that. Right. It's going to benefit, it'll be a win-win for everyone. So that truly, however long I'm fortunate enough to be in this position, my goal will be how can we work better together?
One of the first things that I remember from when we first met, I gave you my analogy of what I saw happening in Appalachia, that the engine of the train had been injection drug use. I felt like it was poly drug use now, hepatitis C, hepatitis D, hepatitis A, workforce development challenges, economic development challenges, educational attainment challenges, with the caboose of that train being HIV, but then with coal being the environmental impact, the economic impact, and the psychological impact of coal being a part of that. And I felt like what we, Community Education Group, and to some extent, and more but greater extent, Appalachian Regional Commission is a boulder that has to stop that train right in its tracks, right? But then we have to separate those cars and kind of deal with each of them. And I think one of the other places where you and I felt like immediate agreement, or I hate the word synergy, but I'm about to use it. But had a meet.
It's a good word.
It's a good word, but it just sounds so mushy.
I know. Well.
So yeah. But was on the idea of the fact that I don't think that people get that of the 423 counties, and that's what I want to say too, is that Appalachia consists of 423 counties. I think 3 got added within the last 2 years. But 44% of those counties touch on more than one state. But ARC is probably the only place federally that they could go to get a grant to move that money across those state lines. Let's have a conversation about moving money across state lines. And I know we can't talk about the advocacy we want to do with every notice of federal funding opportunity, which is what we want to do. But I want to talk about this as a significant thing. And I want to use these last few minutes to talk about that. And I want to also talk about the diversity of the Appalachia region, which I think people have preconceived notions about, which are not true. And I want to talk a bit about that as well.
Okay. Well, the point is about those boundaries. It was amazing to me as I started really then looking more carefully. Then what am I talking? If I'm talking about the region, what am I talking about? Well, we are talking about 423 counties. We're talking about 26 million people. The only entity bigger than us in this country is California and Texas. Mm. Now, we think of things that California does. We think of things that Texas does. We don't think about what a county does. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking, wow, if the Appalachian region could make an impact around this region, around the eastern part of the United States, it could be really impactful.
Right.
It could be transformational. And that's what I continue to want to build on, that if we're recruiting business, why don't we say to that industry, you have a market of 26 million people, mm-hmm. not just people live in Pennsylvania, mm-hmm. or not just people live in Ohio. You've got a market out there of 26 million people. And so it's how we talk about, it's how we start thinking about. And so for ARC, we are in a position, because we have this mountain range that links us together, that's what gives us the ability to start saying, okay, then that's how we want to spend our money. We want to spend it regionally. Something that can make a transformation. You think about, what do we have all through this region? Well, we have educational institutions. We have community colleges, mm-hmm. universities, colleges. We could form a network of all kinds of types of training where we could share and create programs where we need teachers, we need nurses, we need airplane pilots. Mm-hmm. There's so much that we need. When you look at technology, cybersecurity is such an issue. What if we could establish and say we had a well-trained cybersecurity workforce that stretched the entire Appalachian region?
Right.
That we could protect the eastern United States.
Right.
Then I say we not only have parity, we are giving this region the opportunity to compete.
Correct. We're
not just surviving. We compete. So that's, I think, the power of the ARC money, but I think it's also the power of the people that live in this region.
And that's what I want to talk about is the people. People who look at me and people who've known me for years, when I walk into a room to now, they always say, "Are you coming to talk about Appalachia again?" And I'm like, yes, I am.
Good.
And so, but I think for many of them, they look at me and they say, "You are going to talk about Appalachia. Isn't that a bunch of," and then they fill in whatever narrative that they have preconceived of Appalachia. Yes, it's majority white, but it's also, a bit of what we were talking about earlier. It is some of the most vulnerable people in the United States of America, whether that's due to negative health outcomes, negative housing outcomes, negative access to, in some cases, even clean water, fresh water. And I think that also there's also some diversity to the region, that people don't know about or talk about as well.
But let me throw in there, Tony, something's very critical. We talk about lack of parity. Mm. So that's all the people. But then when you look at diversity, then you have to realize that our minority groups, then they drop down even to that lower level.
Right.
Whether it's African American, whether it's women, whatever your minority group, however low we are,
right,
you've got to drop that down. So as we are bringing back parity, we always have to be mindful that we want to lift everyone up.
All boats up. And I think that that's why we started the We Are Appalachia initiative, because we really wanted people to understand that even the kind of thinking and study of the Appalachia region, a decade or two ago, rather than thinking about the culture of the region, which I think is important to preserve. It's important for us to recognize. And it is, because it's like I always say to people that, I live in a place where I know that someone's not going to let me go hungry. Someone's not going to let me go unclothed. We can talk about issues around race, and those things may be true too, but that there's this other part of the culture that I think we sometimes don't necessarily talk about enough. And I think that I want to talk to you a bit about that, because I want to talk to you about how it is that ARC is responding to kind of the need for the people and the cultural piece. How do we preserve how people have, maybe even seen coal in the past? How do we move them to new job training? How do we get them to rethink about jobs? How do we get corporations to see this region of the country, that 26 million people that we're talking about, as valuable assets?
Well, I think it should be in everything that we do. It should be an automatic. One of the things that we are certainly looking at in working with our HBCUs is how can we work more together so it's not HBCUs working on minority issues or diversity issues and then all the other colleges and universities working on. How do we come together and make sure that we're talking about scholarships, internships, training? When we talk to industries, how are they mindful? Are they doing their due diligence in being sure that diversity is being observed at all levels of their hiring and training? Right. And I think that is so important to this whole process. And that's one thing. We are actually this year starting a scholarship fund and in a fellowship program, bringing minorities to DC to work within the ARC, and understanding again that through lack of parity, there are financial constraints. We will be paying for their room and board and also their transportation to go from DC back home and to come back, go back and forth. So it's everybody just thinking a little more openly about how can we do a better job.
Right. So they telling me that I have about 5 more minutes with you, and I don't know, your communications people look like they might get me if I go over. But here's the thing I want to talk about in the end. I think we've covered most of the stuff that I had on my list, but I want you to talk a bit about the work that ARC is now doing in community, right? Through its grants, through its other programs. And maybe tell us a bit about some of those programs that you saw out there when you were going out there to visit that people don't know are out there. And before I go there, but because I was thinking about what you were saying about how we need to come together more. And that's one of the things that we're doing at CEG. So we're working with Marshall. We've reached out to WVU. We're reaching out to a couple of universities in Tennessee about how can we create a research collaborative to work together more constructively and collaboratively also. But I think that it is those opportunities for everybody to kind of figure out what part, as you said earlier, what part can I play? I don't have to do the whole thing, but what part can I play?
Well, it's, we don't have to recreate the wheel. Just like you said, the academic institutions are out there. So why can't we just talk and work together?
Right.
Hospitals are out there. And so how do we make sure telehealth and these clinics are out in our rural areas? Again, parity, leveling the playing field so everyone has access to the same opportunities and necessities that they need. And so I believe that as we move forward, it is going to be about not thinking about what new things do we need, but just how do we use the things that we have differently? How do we think smarter about who we are and what we are? And it should never be about competing with each other.
Right.
It should be how can we compete together to make it all better.
Right.
I think at the end of the day, that is what the bigger picture is all about.
Right.
But Tony, it really takes people like you that are reaching out and having these conversations that make a difference. Because somebody out there will hear this and say, well, I didn't know that. Yeah, or maybe I could be a part of something like that.
Right.
So, again, it's all of us kind of saying, what can I do to spread the word?
Right.
Certainly our communication people have been doing a remarkable job of going out to our different regions of the Appalachian region and filming projects on the ground. Recovery projects, homes that are giving women safe places to live so they can get their children back, giving them job training, power grants that are totally recreating downtown areas, developing their arts and their culture back, power grants that are bringing in new forms of energy. The Appalachian region built this country with the energy out of its mountains and the steel and the coal and the timber and the water. And so I think we will continue to be a builder of this country if we just continue, as you're saying, to think more strategically, work better together, more efficiently. We will continue to keep this country strong.
Perfect. You're so great to me. And I believe that with every fiber of my being as well, is that I think that we have both environmental resources here. I think that we have human capital here as well that often gets overlooked or diminished to some extent. But I also want people to know where and how they can find out more information about ARC, particularly around the Inspire grants, the Power grants, some of the other trainings that you guys offer, some of the other partnership work, and because there's so much information on your website. How do people find out about these grants? How do people get to your website?
arc.gov.
That's simple.
That's easy.
Not like my website, which is like 700 letters long, right?
Well, Tony, let me mention that our capacity building programs, Ready Appalachia, that offers that training to elected officials, to nonprofits, to the local development districts. And it's all about how do you write that plan? How do you write that grant? And so that is one of the really neat things that has come about through ARC and the wonderful staff as they've created these modules for training where these little small communities don't have grant writers and program managers. So that's one way that we can continue to be a support system throughout the region, offering that technical assistance that sometimes is that really what's needed to get that grant off the ground.
And I mean, honestly, we participated in the Ready Appalachia program. I went kicking and screaming, I'll admit that. But it was very, very valuable to us in the end. I mean, it really helped us it actually ended up helping us hire our HR manager. And they really helped us figure out how to do that strategically. And so it wasn't grant writing that we needed as much. It was kind of more kind of expansion as we
whatever
were growing.
You need,
right?
If they can offer that.
Yeah,
so that's important.
So and I think that folks who are taking a look at that or considering doing work in the Appalachia region, arc.gov. As I would always say, thank you, my friend, for spending some time with us this afternoon. And you can keep your We Are Appalachia cup.
Absolutely. Thank you.
and thanks, everybody. Thank you for those who logged in. And we'll be posting this also on YouTube. And we look forward to seeing you again real soon.
I hope so.
I hope so, too.
Thank you.
Thank you.